Hi. I'm an interrogator. This is what the face of interrogation looks like. I've been not torturing for 16 years. The interrogators I've worked with, the interrogators I've trained, know that torture doesn't work. They know that torture is in fact counterproductive. They know that torture is immoral. The national debate has moved to the idea that we need to torture. And you can't escape the discussion. Even if you don't care about it, it's in the news. When I started doing interrogation 16 years ago, I'd have the discussion about torture 2 to 3 times a year. When I start teaching a class, one of the first things we cover is that we don't torture and why, and we have the discussion. The question comes up. What kinds of torture do you use is the question I used to get when I was talking about this 2 to 3 times a year. And I would explain why it doesn't work, and that would pretty much solve the problem. Along comes 2004. Abu Ghraib makes the news. All of a sudden, I'm not having the conversation 2 to 3 times a year, I'm having it 2 to 3 times a month. It's pernicious, this conversation, because it's such a believable narrative. Who wouldn't talk? Well, that's the problem, who wouldn't talk? I guarantee you that if I don't have any restrictions, I can get anybody in here confessing to cutting their own head off. It's a little harder than getting you confessed to cutting your finger off. I could do that a whole lot faster because you know, actually, that's not true. It would be a little harder to get you confessed to cutting your finger off than cutting your head off because you'll confess to things that are obviously not true because you know there's no repercussion. But you will confess to anything if I don't have restraint. As an interrogator, I don't care what the answers are. My job is to get information. Getting information is easy. The fact that you don't know is information. What you know is information. If you don't want to talk to me, how many people I got in here? There's what, 100 people? If I got 100 people and 80 of you don't want to talk, 20 of you will. And those 20 will provide pretty much everything I need to know, which is why I don't need to torture. Once you start talking, you'll give me everything. And somebody will start talking. All I got to be is nice. I can get everything I want with milk and cookies. If you told me 8 years ago that I'd be standing in front of a church group on a Friday night, Pride weekend in San Francisco, talking about why we shouldn't be torturing, I'd have laughed. It's an insane proposition. We don't do that. Which isn't true. I mean, I'm not going to stand here and say I don't think anybody working for the U.S. or sanctioned by the U.S. has never gone and committed an act of torture. I know it's not true. I know for a fact that sleep deprivation, roughly 1988, 89, got an Army interrogator sent to jail because he was obeying the letter of the law and letting the prisoner have 8 hours of sleep in 15-minute intervals with 15 minutes awake in between. And when the guard reported it, the commander moved up the chain, and that guy got cashiered and did not enough time in military prison. I know that the CIA, Kubark, anybody here heard of Kubark? Yeah, the CIA doesn't play by the same rules. For whatever reasons, they think that torture's sufficient, adequate. We rendered people to other places to do the work for us. By the way, in a war, doing that is against Geneva Conventions. You capture him, you're responsible for him. You hand him to somebody else to beat him up, you're responsible for him. I don't know why the folks at the top, and it is the folks at the top, because torture is illegal. The International Treaty Against Torture, which Reagan signed, the War Crimes Act of 1998, which Clinton signed, make it illegal. When they said that the stuff that happened in Iraq, they were contractors, we couldn't do anything to them because general order of the CPA Number 17 says that folks in Iraq aren't subject to Iraqi law and there's no U.S. law. That is, to use a word, bullshit. Because the War Crimes Act of 1998 says if you're an American and you commit a war crime anywhere in the world, we can send you to jail. Which raises the question, why did the government say we can't do anything about it? The answer then becomes, they wanted there to be torture. And the question for that is why? And I can't tell you, because it doesn't get information. Torture is good at a lot of things. It's good at social control. It's good at getting you scapegoats. It's not good at getting information. And if you have bad information, you get bad intelligence. So why am I here? Why am I here? I'm here because I talk, because I write. Because in the course of having a discussion on this subject in response to a newspaper column online in New Jersey, I was doing some research and I found reference to a paper of Dr. Riga's, and I sent her a note saying, can I get a copy of this paper because all I have is the abstract? And she said, well, there's this conference in San Francisco. Could you come? All my other interrogators are worn out. And I said, sure, because I talk. I've taught 300 interrogators how to do this job, more or less. I went to war with about 30 of them, more or less. To the best of my knowledge, none of them have committed any tortures. I'd like to think that when tempted, and it's tempting, let me tell you, it's tempting. In training, I've come this close to crossing the line. You would be amazed what you can get with coffee crystals and Tabasco sauce. They said, well, you know, Sergeant Jorgensen, Sergeant Karney, Sergeant whomever, said don't do it, and they'd be disappointed. I'd like to think that. If I'd done nothing else, then 16 years was worth it. 16 years. Not 20, 16. The fun went out of it. Part of the reason the fun went out of it is because I don't know what's in the top secret annex to the field manual for interrogation. I don't know what someone can give me a lawful order to do. And I don't want to be in a position of saying, send my sorry self to jail, because I won't do that. That's part of it. That's the part that matters here. It's not the only reason. I'd probably not still be in, given the other fun that left it, if I didn't have that question. But that's part of it. You know, why are you here? I don't know. I'm assuming you're here because you'd like to better tell people why torture is a bad idea. And tomorrow on my chunk of time, we're going to go into that in detail. We will go into how interrogation really works. We'll go into why torture doesn't work, and we will, if you're able to follow along, and I hope to make it really simple, explain why the ticking bomb doesn't work, and you can then go out and tell people why the ticking bomb doesn't work. And if they don't believe you, you can send them to me, and I will explain it to them in really small words. The short answer is the ticking bomb doesn't work because it requires so many things to be just so that you can never get there. The other thing about the ticking bomb and why it's so pernicious to attempt to answer Dave's question is that ticking bomb is a moral question. It's a moral question with a gotcha. Because as presented, it is almost impossible to say, no, I won't torture him. And once you've agreed you're going to torture him, well, torture's okay. The question is just when. And that's why that's the real reason the ticking bomb doesn't go away, because the folks who are supporting torture don't want to say, I'm supporting something immoral. And the ticking bomb gives them an out, because in this circumstance, it's okay. And then they can say, we'll never do it when it's not in this circumstance, so it's okay. And they don't have to do it. They don't have to ponder it. And it's all being discussed in nice, quiet little language. Simulated drowning. No one really got hurt. Bullshit. Which pretty much sums up why I'm here.